My daughter-in-law cut up my Halloween costume, then posted 20 photos of her wearing it. Her mom commented, "Ha ha ha. My name is Megan Larson. I am 64, a retired high school history teacher, and a widow. I live in a quiet 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Chicago. I like my life organized, peaceful, and entirely mine." The costume in question wasn't a plastic bag from a pop-up store. It was an authentic, hand-stitched 1890s Victorian evening gown. I spent 4 months sourcing the emerald silk and antique black lace. I drafted the pattern myself. I wore it once to a historical society gala with my late husband, then carefully cleaned it, wrapped it in acid-free tissue, and stored it in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Last weekend, I drove upstate to visit my daughter Sarah. I asked my son David to drop by and feed my cat. Instead, David sent his wife, Brenda. Brenda is 28, relentlessly trendy, and treats my house like a free vintage boutique. She constantly borrows my sweaters, serving dishes and jewelry, usually returning them damaged or not at all. David always excuses it. "She just loves your style, Mom." On Monday morning, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through Instagram. There it was, Brenda posing at a crowded Halloween house party. The emerald silk was chopped raggedly at mid-thigh. The long tailored sleeves were ripped off at the shoulders. She had splashed fake blood down the bodice and pinned a plastic spider to the delicate antique lace. The caption read, "Victorian zombie bride, slayed it." 20 photos. Different angles. In one, she was spilling a red cocktail on the skirt. In the comments, her friends praised her creativity. Her mother, Susan, simply commented, "Ha ha, so clever." I stared at the screen. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just felt a cold, sharp clarity settle over my kitchen. I finished my coffee. Then I went upstairs to the cedar chest. It was empty, the tissue paper carelessly tossed on the floor. I knew exactly what I had to do. I did not call David to demand an explanation. I did not text Brenda to ask how she could be so careless. Arguments require 2 participants, and I had no intention of participating in a debate about my own property. Instead, I walked into my home office, turned on my computer, and opened a spreadsheet. I pulled up my archived bank statements. I found the exact cost of the emerald silk, $450. The antique lace from an estate sale, $280. The specialty thread and silk lining, $120. Then I calculated my labor. I had spent at least 80 hours constructing that gown. At a standard tailor's rate of $25 an hour, that was $2,000. Total, $2,850. I drafted a formal invoice. I clearly itemized every material and labor hour. Under Reason for Billing, I typed unauthorized removal, alteration, and destruction of stored personal property. I saved it as a PDF and emailed it to both of them. I said nothing. I sent her a bill for the damage. At 9:03 am, she texted, "Why do I have to pay for an old costume?" I looked at the message, the cursor blinking on my phone screen. I typed back calmly, "Because you stole it from my bedroom, destroyed it, and wore it." The invoice is due by Friday. After that, I will begin deducting it from the financial support I provide this household. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. It was David. "Mom, what is this?" He sounded breathless, embarrassed. "Brenda is freaking out. You sent her a bill for $3,000 over an old dress." "It is a custom-made silk gown, David," I replied. "And she ruined it." "Come on, it was just sitting in a box. She thought it was an old Halloween thing. You're overreacting. Just take the bill back." "No," I answered, my voice completely flat. "The bill stands." "Mom, seriously, stop being dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, David. I'm being precise." I hung up the phone. I didn't block his number, but I put my phone on silent. Then I walked to the front door, and remove the smart lock code they used to enter my house. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I heard the familiar rattle of David's truck pulling into my driveway. I was in the living room quietly dusting my bookshelves. Through the window, I watched them march up the front walkway. Brenda looked furious, carrying a crumpled grocery bag. David punched his code into the front door keypad. It beeped red. He tried again. Red. He knocked loudly. I took my time walking to the door. I opened it, leaving the chain engaged. "The code isn't working." David frowned, looking confused. "I deleted it," I informed him. I unhooked the chain and let them step into the foyer, but I didn't offer them a seat. Brenda shoved the grocery bag toward my chest. I didn't reach for it, letting it drop to the floor. Inside, the ruined green silk spilled out stained dark with fake blood and smelling strongly of cheap tequila. "There," Brenda crossed her arms. "I brought it back. I washed it in the sink, but the red stuff won't come out. It's just fabric, Megan. I don't know why you're trying to ruin our week." "You washed raw silk in the sink?" I asked gently. "Whatever, it's clean. Cancel the invoice." "The invoice is for the destruction of the garment, Brenda. Returning the rags does not cancel the debt." David stepped between us, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, we don't have almost $3,000 lying around. You know things are tight right now. Why are you doing this?" "Because she went into my private bedroom, opened a closed trunk, took something that belonged to me, and destroyed it for a party," I replied, looking directly into David's eyes. "I am not demanding an apology. I am demanding restitution." "Well, you're not getting a dime," Brenda snapped, turning toward the door. "Let's go, David. She's being completely unreasonable. We'll come back when she calms down." "You won't be coming back inside," I corrected her. "You no longer have access to this house." David and Brenda had always assumed my resources were an extension of their own. When David struggled to find work 3 years ago, I added them both to my unlimited family cell phone plan. I also quietly took over the payments for David's car insurance. It was supposed to be temporary. 3 years later, it was simply an expectation. They never offered to pay. And until now, I had never asked. After they left my house, I walked back to my home office. I opened my internet browser and logged into my Verizon account. With 3 clicks, I suspended both David and Brenda's phone lines. I didn't cancel them outright, that would incur fees, but I paused the service entirely. No data, no texts, no calls, unless connected to Wi-Fi. Next, I opened my auto insurance portal. I removed David's truck from my policy. The pro-rated refund of $340 would hit my account in 3 business days. I didn't send a warning text. I didn't write an email explaining my actions. I simply severed the invisible financial cords they had taken for granted. At 4:15 p.m., an iMessage popped up on my iPad from David. "Mom, our phones say SOS. Did you forget to pay the bill?" I typed back, "I didn't forget. I removed you from my plan. Since you cannot afford the invoice for the gown, I am helping you cut expenses. You also need to arrange your own car insurance by midnight. You are no longer on my policy." The typing bubble disappeared, and appeared again. "Are you serious? I need my truck for work tomorrow." "Then I suggest you purchase a policy tonight," I replied. Brenda tried to call me through Facebook Messenger audio a few minutes later, clearly scrambling on her home Wi-Fi. I let it ring. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of iced tea, and watched the neighborhood birds gather at the feeder in my backyard. For the first time in years, the house felt entirely, wonderfully quiet. The next morning, my daughter Sarah arrived. She had driven 2 hours from the city carrying 2 lattes and a worried expression. Sarah is 32 sharp and entirely different from her brother. Where David avoids conflict, Sarah meets it head-on. I led her to the kitchen and pointed to the crumpled grocery bag on the table. Sarah pulled out the mangled green silk. "Oh, Mom!" She breathed, her hands hovering over the shredded lace. "You worked on this for months. Dad helped you find this lace in that antique shop in Boston." "I know," I answered, taking my coffee. Sarah's face flushed dark red. "I'm going to kill her. I'm going to post the photos of this ruined dress right next to her stupid zombie pictures and tag all her friends." "No, you won't." I stopped her immediately. "We don't need a public circus. I already sent them a bill. I cut off their phones and car insurance." Sarah stared at me, her mouth slightly open. A slow, deeply satisfied smile spread across her face. "You cut off their phones. Finally." "There is one more thing I need your help with," I noted, setting my mug down. "Follow me." I took her down to the basement. Over the last 2 years, David and Brenda had slowly colonized my storage space. There were boxes of Brenda's seasonal decor, David's college sports gear, an old mattress they were saving, and 3 bins of Brenda's unused craft supplies. "They treat this house like a free storage unit," I explained. "It stops today." For the next 3 hours, Sarah and I hauled every single box bin and item belonging to them up the stairs. We dragged them into the garage and stacked them neatly by the garage door. We didn't break anything. We didn't throw anything away. We just removed it from my sanctuary. Just as we placed the last box, my iPad chimed in the kitchen. It was David. "Brenda's mom wants to talk to you." Susan, Brenda's mother, was a woman who believed every conflict could be erased with a forced laugh and a platter of muffins. She called my landline at noon. "Megan, honey." Susan started, her tone dripping with artificial sweetness. "David told me what's going on. Goodness, things have certainly gotten out of hand over a little Halloween prank." "It wasn't a prank, Susan," I answered evenly. "It was theft and property damage." "Oh, let's not use such ugly words." She chuckled nervously. "Brenda is just devastated. You know how young people are, they just don't think cutting off their phones. Don't you think you're being a bit harsh? It's family." "Family respects each other's homes," I replied. "Brenda owes me $2,850. If you feel it's just a minor misunderstanding, you are more than welcome to write the check for her." The line went dead quiet. The fake warmth vanished. "I am certainly not paying for that," Susan snapped. "Then I suggest you stop managing her debts," I said, and hung up the phone. It was early November. For the past 4 years, Brenda had hosted Thanksgiving. That meant the family gathered at her house, but I purchased all the groceries, brought the turkey, and spent 2 days cooking in her kitchen while she entertained guests. It was an exhausting dynamic I had tolerated to keep the peace. Not anymore. I opened my email and canceled the $250 pre-order for the heritage turkey at the local butcher. I texted Sarah. "Change of plans. I'm coming to your apartment for Thanksgiving." Just the 2 of us. Sarah texted back instantly. "Turkey or prime rib, I'll buy." At 5:00 p.m., I finally responded to David's earlier message. I attached a photo of the mountain of boxes in my garage. "Your belongings are in the garage. The door will be open tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. If they are not collected by then, I will arrange for a charity pickup." David arrived exactly at 10:00 a.m. on Saturday. He came alone, pulling his truck up to the open garage. He looked tired. The passive, easygoing expression he usually wore was replaced by a tight, stressed grimace. He started loading boxes into the truck bed. In silence, I stood in the doorway, leading from the kitchen to the garage, holding a cup of tea, simply watching him. After the 4th box, he stopped and turned to me. "Are you happy now, Mom? You're blowing up the whole family." "I haven't blown up anything," I noted calmly. "I set a boundary. You and your wife chose to crash into it. She made a mistake. David threw his hands up. You're acting like she burned the house down. Now we have a $300 car insurance bill. We had to switch to prepaid phones, and Brenda is crying every night because you're kicking us out of Thanksgiving. I didn't kick you out. I simply declined to buy and cook the meal. David groaned, rubbing his face. Mom, she doesn't know how to cook a turkey. Her whole family is coming to our house. What are we supposed to do? Figure it out, I answered. You are 30 years old. You are a married man hosting a dinner party. Buy a turkey and put it in the oven. It is not my responsibility to save you from the reality of your own life. He stared at me, genuinely shocked. For his entire life, I had been the shock absorber. I had smoothed over the rough edges, paid the forgotten bills, cooked the meals, and absorbed the disrespect so he wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. You're really not going to help us, he muttered, finally understanding. When the invoice for the gown is paid, we can discuss moving forward. Until then, take your boxes, David. He didn't argue anymore. He loaded the rest of the bins, slammed the tailgate of his truck, and drove away without looking back. 3 days later, I was outside pruning my hydrangeas when a silver SUV pulled aggressively into my driveway. Brenda and her mother Susan marched across the lawn. Brenda carried a thin white envelope. I didn't step back. I set my pruning shears down on the patio table and waited. Here. Brenda thrust the envelope toward me. It's $500. That's more than enough for that old fabric. Now turn the phones back on and tell David you're doing Thanksgiving. I didn't take the envelope. I looked at it, then looked at her. The bill is $2,850, and the phone lines are permanently transferred. I no longer manage your accounts. Susan stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. She was wearing too much perfume. Listen here, Megan. You are being completely ridiculous. You are alienating your son over a piece of clothing. You take this money and you apologize to Brenda for causing all this stress. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Susan. I spoke softly, keeping my posture completely relaxed. This is my property. You are trespassing. Brenda broke into my bedroom, destroyed a family heirloom, and humiliated me on the internet for attention. She will pay the full amount, or she will remain blocked from my life. It is entirely her choice. You're a bitter old woman. Brenda spat her face, twisting into something ugly. The mask was entirely off. David was right. You just want to control us. If I wanted to control you, I would have kept paying your bills, I replied. Independence is expensive, Brenda. I suggest you get used to it. I picked up my shears and turned my back on them, resuming my work on the hydrangeas. I heard Susan gasp in offense. They stood there for a full minute, waiting for me to turn around, waiting for an argument. When I gave them nothing but silence, they finally retreated to the SUV and sped away. The silence in the following weeks was profound. Thanksgiving came and went. I took the train to the city and spent 3 wonderful days with Sarah. We cooked a small prime rib, drank good wine, and watched old movies. I didn't check Facebook to see how Brenda's dinner turned out. I didn't care. In early December, I checked my mail and found a certified letter. Inside was a cashier's check for $2,350. There was a short note written in David's handwriting. Here is the rest of the money. Can we please move on now? He had finally realized that I was not going to break. The lost cell phone plan, the car insurance, the free storage, and the free catering were costing them far more than the invoice. Paying it was an act of financial surrender, not genuine remorse. I took the check to the bank and deposited it into my savings account. That evening, David called. I answered on the second ring. Did you get it? He asked, his voice strained. I did. Thank you, David. So, he hesitated. Are we good? Can Brenda and I come over this weekend? You can come over, David. I answered clearly. Brenda is not welcome. Mom, I paid the bill. You said when the bill was paid, we could move forward. I said we could discuss moving forward, I corrected him. Paying the invoice settles the financial debt for the property she destroyed. It does not erase her behavior, her disrespect, or the things she said on my front lawn. Trust is earned back, David. It cannot be bought with a cashier's check. He was silent for a long time. The weight of the reality was settling on him. He couldn't force me back into the box I used to inhabit. I don't know how to fix this, he finally whispered. You don't, I told him gently. She does. And until she figures it out, my door remains locked. Months have passed since Halloween. The harsh Chicago winter melted into a bright, crisp spring. I took the damaged emerald silk into my sewing room. The bodice was ruined beyond repair, but the skirt was largely salvageable. I spent the quiet January evenings unpicking the seams, washing the fabric carefully, and redesigning it. By March, I had transformed the remnants of the Victorian gown into a beautiful, modern, emerald silk shawl. I wear it when I sit on the porch in the evenings. David visits me every other Sunday for coffee. He comes alone. He looks a little older, a little more tired, but we actually talk now. Without Brenda buffering every interaction, without the constant demand for my resources, our relationship has found a strange, honest new rhythm. He mentioned once that Brenda had to take on extra shifts at the clinic to cover their new bills. I simply nodded, offered him another biscuit, and changed the subject. Her financial struggles are no longer my jurisdiction. Sarah visits often. We are planning a trip to London next autumn, funded partly by the money I save every month, not paying for my son's lifestyle. Sometimes mothers are taught that love means endless endurance. We are told to absorb the disrespect, swallow the insults, and keep the peace at the expense of our own sanity. We are made to feel that if we close our doors, we are failing our families. But I have learned the opposite is true. True peace does not come from appeasement. It comes from drawing a line in the sand and refusing to be moved. My daughter-in-law thought she could cut up my life and post it for laughs, expecting me to smile through the humiliation. Instead, she learned exactly what happens when the bank of mom permanently closes its doors. I lost a dress, but I gained my house, my quiet, and myself. And the new shawl is breathtaking.